Welcome everyone to the 2022-23 school year CAIS seminar series. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that this is actually our first seminar for this semester as well as for this school year. And I'm pleased, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Eric Rice. I'm the co-director along with Bistro Delkina, who I do not believe is here this afternoon, of the USC Center for Artificial Intelligence and Society. And I'm also joined by Phoebe Vianos, who is an associate director, and Haley Weintraub, who is our center coordinator. And today we have Dr. Carl Castro, who is a member of the USC School of Social Work faculty. So let me read a little brief bio on Carl, but before I do that, I wanted to just give one moment of framing remarks. With the USC Center for AI and Society, we really strive to have collaborations between people in computer science and engineering, as well as people in social work. And periodically, we will have presentations that are more from one discipline than the other. And oftentimes that is so we can expose our students to the work that happens in these other spaces in the hopes that we can get people excited about interdisciplinary work and where interdisciplinary work might happen. And Dr. Castro is a social work researcher, and definitely is, when he and I were talking, he said that he wanted to discuss some of his broad ideas about transition theory, and that this is hopefully going to be inspiring for those of you who would like to work on transdisciplinary work to understand some of the social work context work a little bit better, although Dr. Castro does have experience doing AI-driven work. So Dr. Castro is currently professor and director of the Military and Veteran Program at the Suzanne Dworak-Peck School of Social Work at USC. Before joining the University of California, Professor Castro served in the US Army for over 30 years, where he retired at the rank of colonel. Dr. Castro participated in the Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Kosovo campaigns, Operation Northern Watch, and the Iraq War. Dr. Castro has chaired numerous NATO and international research groups. He is currently the chair of the NATO Research Group on Military Veteran Transitions and is co-chair of a NATO group exploring military and veteran radicalization. His current research efforts are broad, and they include the exploration of military culture that leads to acceptance and integration of diverse groups. He's also interested in understanding and ameliorating the effects of military trauma and stress, especially combat and deployment, on service members and their families. He also does work on the prevention of suicide and violence, such as sexual assault and bullying. And he also works in evaluating the processes of transition into the military and transitioning from military service back into civilian life, which, if I'm not mistaken, is what the focus of today's work is going to be. So with that, Carl, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm just going to jump right into this presentation. And I always have too many slides, and I always talk too much on any one particular slide. So please don't focus on taking notes. I'll make these slides available to anyone who wants them. And instead you can sort of think about what I'm saying, jot down questions or ideas that you have. And I think that will be a better use of your time, and it'll take pressure off me for having to go over every slide. So some of the slides I'm going to go over very, very quickly. And when I do that, I'll point out that I think everything that I'm going to be talking about today, there are a few exceptions, and I'll point those out, has been published. So you can read about it at a more relaxed pace and in more depth if you're interested. So let's jump right into this. Again, I'm going to talk about military service members transitioning from active duty back to their community. So purpose is to discuss the challenges that military members have and experience when they transition back. And hopefully, and as Eric said, it will encourage AI experts. I'm not an AI expert, I've dabbled in it, but it will hopefully encourage some of you maybe to become interested and assist us in understanding these challenges and, more importantly, identifying solutions. And I just want to say this up front, because if I don't say it here, I'll forget. We are currently in the process of conducting the largest ever study of veterans in Southern California. That includes Los Angeles County, Orange County, and San Diego County. And we're right in the middle of that data collection. We're hoping to complete it this calendar year. So if anyone is interested in being involved in that project or using AI data analysis techniques for analyzing that data, please contact me, and we'd love to have you be part of that effort. So let me jump in. Here's my outline. So many of you know in the military, you begin every talk with an outline. So here's my outline. And I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'm going to talk about military culture. Then I'm going to talk about some paradoxes that I think will help you understand how that military culture influences the individual veteran. And then I'm going to talk about military transition theory. And then I'm going to show you some old data that we collected almost 10 years ago in Los Angeles, looking at how veterans are doing. And this is the study that we're replicating in Southern California. So you'll get a real sense of the kinds of data that we're collecting and what problems we're still interested in addressing. So I don't think it's a surprise that the US has been at war for almost 2 decades in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I think you all saw on TV, Afghanistan didn't end well. US lost that war. But we still have veterans from those wars leaving active duty and joining our community. There are approximately 325,000 veterans living in Los Angeles County, about 500,000 in total in Southern California. LA gets about 12,000 new veterans every year moving into its community. So you think about that, 12,000 people, new people coming to the county every year, many of them with jobs, most without. I'll show you some data on that. And communities and providers and leaders within the community are increasingly taking ownership to help the veterans transition back into the communities. So these are some, one of the things, I'm going to get into some, what I will call negative things, mental health issues, employment issues, etc. But I want to start off first with some basic positive facts about veterans and service members and their families that we should not forget, kind of keep this to the forefront. Most are doing okay. Most veterans, most service members, most families are doing fine. Most service members and veterans do not have PTSD. Okay, they're not suicidal. They're not homicidal. Most are doing fine. Okay, we're going to focus though on that significant minority that don't do well, but I want you to keep in mind always most are doing well. Families are pretty resilient. And even though there could be some Department of Veterans Affairs bashing, I won't be one of those. I think the VA does a pretty good job of taking care of veterans who use them. Just over 50%, maybe 55, 56% of veterans actually use the VA. For those veterans who do use the VA, they are generally happy with the service they get. And then finally, or not finally, America really supports its military. Okay, you will not see another nation anywhere in the world that supports the military and veterans like America does. I think we can talk more about that. It's almost its own talk. And then finally, the military is a great organization to work for. I'm not going to dwell on that too much, but for those of you who are interested why I have that very strong view, we can talk offline or during the Q&A session. Okay, so I've started off by saying that I think the military is its own culture. Some people will describe it as a subculture. I will describe it as its own culture. And here's what I mean by that. First, the military has a unique mission, which is to fight and win our nation's war. So you think about that, what's involved in fighting and winning a war? It involves killing people. It involves being exposed to trauma on purpose. That's what the military does. It brings death and destruction upon other people, upon cities, and upon societies, okay, when there's a war. For those of you who are following the war in the Ukraine, you get a sense that's exactly what it's like. But the military is also a very value-based organization. Unlike any organization you'll see anywhere outside of the military, they're very value-based. They're very hierarchical. I think everybody knows that. We're very hierarchical. It's very clear who's in charge and who's on the bottom. In the rest of society, it becomes very ambiguous. As a faculty member, how important is a faculty member? How important is a full professor compared to associate professor compared to a member of staff? We have these conversations all the time. In the military, there's no conversation. The commander's in charge, is executive officer, second in charge, etc. The chain of command is very clear. There's no ambiguity about roles. There's formal and informal rules and norms that drive all of our behavior in the military. And I'll talk about a little bit those when I get to the paradoxes. There's a unique and nuanced language that's used in the military and that's still used among veterans. I'll try not to use any of that language, but if I slip into it, please just someone type in the chat, what did you mean when you said that? And I'll be happy to explain it. There's also this idea, even though the military is a very conservative organization, it really functions like a collective socialism. So for those of you who are in political science or who enjoy reading political science, you can think of the military culture as one of collective socialism. And what do we mean by that? Everybody in the military has a job. There's no soldier or airman or sailor or Marine or Coast Guard man or woman who don't have a job. Everybody has a job. Everybody's provided housing or subsidized housing, money to have adequate housing. Everyone gets free medical care and dental care, and they have access to commissaries and post exchanges and all of these things that as a civilian you have to sort out for yourself. In the military, these things are provided for you, okay? So, and then all of this leads somewhat to what we would call a unique military identity, where those who serve in the military often describe themselves when they leave the military as being a stranger in their own country. They feel like a foreigner. They feel like a foreigner because they're coming from a different culture. And when you think about the age at which men and women join the military, it's around 18, 19 years of age, during those formative years of figuring out who they are. And by the time they leave, they're in their mid to late 20s, if they do 1 or 2 tours. So their identity is now formed, and it's formed by that military experience, that being part of that military culture. Okay, so I'm going to very briefly talk about some of the influences of war and combat. So I titled this section, Things We Need to Remember We Know, because oftentimes we rediscover things that we know, right? And that happens in every society because every society thinks their conflict is unique and different, and their experiences are unique and different. Oh, we've never seen this before. But I can assure you, for those historians who are on this webinar, it cycles. There's very, very little that we haven't seen historically. And probably the solutions are going to be very similar to what they were even 200 or 300 years ago. So I'm going to quickly go through this data. All of this data has been published, and I'm happy to provide, not only by us, but by lots of other people corroborating these findings. I'm just going to hit the highlights. Happy to talk in more detail about this. So first, combat results in an increase in PTSD rates. This slide simply shows before OIF, and for those of you who may be too young to remember, OIF stands for Operation Iraqi Freedom. So that's the war in Iraq. PTSD rates in garrison from soldiers who've never deployed, 5%. Important thing to note, it's not zero. PTSD is not zero in the military until they go to war. It's 5%. 3 months after a year-long deployment to Iraq, fighting, this is in a brigade combat team, as you can see in the words, it's now 14.6%. So it's about a 3-fold increase. Now that's for the entire brigade combat team. I will show you data later, I think, that will show you that it depends on what you do. So if you're in a combat arms, going out on patrol day in and day out, this rate could be twice that, even higher. Okay, so, but this is for brigade combat team, and for those of you, give you some sense, that's about 3,000 soldiers. So 3,000 soldiers, when they deploy as a brigade combat team, 3,000 people, the rate of PTSD goes from about 5% to 15%. Okay, we know that soldiers who have deployed come back more angry and more aggressive. This is just data that shows that, but just think about, you come back from war, you're more angry. You're angry about a lot of things, and you're more aggressive because you've been in this sort of aggressive fight mode, for a year. So that's kind of your tendency, is to be aggressive, to fight. Okay, so anger, you kick things, throw things, that kind of stuff. Okay. Now we also know that soldiers, when they deploy, multiple times they're worse off. So this slide simply shows that. So basically looking at the PCL, post-traumatic stress deployment checklist, or PTSD scale for short, for using sort of common language, what we see is that those who've deployed multiple times are more likely to screen positive for post-traumatic stress disorder than those who are on the first deployment. Now, some people will say, well, shouldn't that first deployment have inoculated you, had you build resilience? No, the data shows that we all have our breaking points. We all have our points of which the trauma accumulates. So this whole idea of the way to build resilience and to build strong mental health is to expose people to trauma is nonsense. Here's like a real world study showing that it doesn't work that way. In fact, it exacerbates things. So I think you probably heard the song, What Doesn't, I can't say, but I'm tone deaf, so I can't sing it too, but you know, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. It's fiction. What doesn't kill you predisposes you next time, okay? So I always ask this question, what's the best predictor of someone who's gonna suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder? That's right, somebody who's had post-traumatic stress disorder. What's the best predictor of someone who's gonna die by suicide? Someone who's attempted previous suicide. What's the best predictor of someone who's gonna have a back injury? That's right, someone who's had a previous back injury. So having a back injury doesn't strengthen your back. It just predisposes you for another back injury, okay? So just keep that in mind. Some things we say about in kind of this catty way, they're just not true. Now you can be stronger in other areas, okay? But you're not gonna have a stronger back, or you're not gonna be protected against PTSD from suffering from it. But you might be protected, say, against anxiety, okay? Or some other thing related, but it's not gonna be that thing, all right? We also know the longer you're deployed, the more likely you are going to have PTSD. This makes sense, right? The longer you're in a combat environment, the more likely you are to be exposed to traumatic events, and more likely you are going to be exposed to a variety of different types of traumatic events. So that's not surprising, but it's always nice to see that. Leadership. We know that good leadership matters. This is Army leadership here, and what it basically shows that if you have good leaders, they can protect you somewhat against the effects of combat on mental health issues. This is what this data shows here. So if you have a really good leader and you're in high combat, you can see it's only 17% screen positive for a mental health issue. And these mental health issues are PTSD, depression, and anxiety. However, if you have a bad leader, so low leadership in high combat, it's twice as bad. And look over here in low combat. Low combat is still 20% if you have a bad leader in low combat. But look at it here, 5% low combat, good leaders, 5%. You remember what it was in garrison before deployed? 5%. So it basically almost completely protects a group of individuals from the adverse effects. This matters too in civilian life. There's not been a lot of studies on this, but we've all had bad supervisors, and they can make life miserable for you if you work for them. So this isn't unique to the military, but we have some really good data showing the role of leadership in combat. This is one of the very first studies that's ever been done on this topic. And again, this has been published in much more detail. There's a mental health training program called Battle Mind Training that I actually developed with a lot of other folks. And it's a psychoeducation. It's a 1-hour psychoeducation that educates soldiers returning from combat or preparing to go to combat what to expect when they get home. Here's things you can expect. This is how you can expect combat to have changed. Remember those things I talked about earlier? Those kinds of things. Some of the paradoxes I'll talk about. We prep them. These are things you can expect to happen. And here are some skills that you have that you can use to manage them. So it's not about teaching new skills. It's about getting them to leverage existing skills. So in some ways you can say this is a strength-based education program, or it's a positive psychology. You can use whatever word you want, but it's about educating from a psychoeducation perspective on how to manage the stressors of being gone in a combat environment for a year. What this slide here simply shows is those who got that training were less likely to show signs of depression and PTSD compared to those who got a standard stress education. And that standard stress education consisted of things like the Yahtzee, Dirksen curve, A stress, U stress, distress. Soldiers don't care about that. They want to know, how have I changed and what can I do to manage those changes? And what we've shown is that this training works. And the Army, by the way, adopted this training for about 8 years throughout the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to help soldiers return back home from deployment. Okay, so there's also a lot of things that aren't true, that we think are true. These are just, you do a lot of mental health screening, population mental health screening. It does not work, okay? I've been involved in it. I've been helping develop the screens, and the data just shows it doesn't work. There's lots of other things I already mentioned, like you can develop resilience in people, so when they're exposed to trauma, they won't have a mental health issue. No, you can't. Everyone has a point at which they can't cope. Okay, we all have sort of, I don't want to say breaking point, because we all have our breaking point, but we all have a point at which we can't go on. Okay, and there's some other things, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just want you to know we are working on these topics. We are working on these topics, but we don't have solutions right now. Okay, now I'm going to really go through the combat veteran paradoxes fairly quickly, only because you can read about it here. And I've actually got like a TEDx type talk. It's not a TEDx video, but it's a video done in that spirit that sort of has me standing up there talking about what combat veteran paradoxes are. And I'll highlight a few examples. I'm going to run through these very quickly because I think it will give you a sense of how does military service, how does combat, how do deployments change the individual? So think about it more broadly. How does the military culture change that individual? I'm going to be sticking on time. I think I'm doing pretty good. So what is a paradox? So this is, I think, a paraphrase out of some online dictionary I looked at, but this is a pretty good definition. It's a statement that appears to contradict itself, but yet it might be true. So an example that I give, a civilian example, is my wife. I come home from work and my wife says, I saved you money by buying this item on sale. So I'm thinking, how did you save me money if you spent money? Well, because I got it on sale and it would have cost you more money. So how is that a paradox? Yes, because that doesn't seem to make sense. You spent money to save money, but you save money if you bought something that we needed, right? But if she bought something that I don't think we needed, then I'm not sure money was actually saved. But if she was going to buy it anyway, then yes, she saved money. So this is an example, but you see how that required explanation. Okay, so let me just go into this. So the big combat veteran paradox is combat veterans are healthy, but they can still benefit from counseling. Now that seems paradoxical, right? Well, if I'm healthy, why do I need to talk to anyone? Because you've changed. And sometimes having a conversation, whether it's a mentoring or a psychoeducation like Battle Mind, it will help contextualize those experiences. So, but there are objections to this, all right? So I'm kind of, here are the naysayers to this idea. They say that if you tell someone who's been in combat, who's been in a highly stressful occupation like the military, that they can benefit from counseling, that I'm pathologizing normal combat symptoms and reactions. Just because reactions are normal and expected, that doesn't mean they're not impairing, okay? And therefore, I'm creating a veteran dependence. I think it's the opposite. I think that by veterans understanding what they've been through and how they've changed, that helps them leverage the skills they have in order to cope more effectively. Some says it may interfere with the normal recovery process following combat. It enhances the perception that combat veterans are all screwed up. Okay, I don't believe that. There's this whole movement around dropping the D from post-traumatic stress disorder, dropping the word disorder, because that implies a pathology. I'm not sure it does that, but it's along those lines. One could argue it diverts scarce mental health resources away from those veterans in greater need. And that might be true, because what do we do from a medical perspective? We often wait until someone needs hospitalized and needs surgery. What I'm arguing for is early prevention. Why wait until someone starts self-medicating with alcohol and drugs before we help them? Let's help them understand what's going on early so they don't self-medicate. So, and then some people say it represents an attempt by mental health professionals to maintain job security by creating a problem that doesn't exist. I'm not even saying mental health professionals need to do this. I think other veterans could do this, from other wars can do this. So, and it's disingenuous to call counseling not treatment, but not all counseling is treatment, right? Not all counseling is treatment. So this is the list of paradoxes. Again, I'm going to show each one. They're in this presentation, but I'm not going to go into any detail on them. So please, I hope that's acceptable. But understanding these paradoxes can help you understand what many veterans are going through. Now, I want to start off by saying not every veteran shows all of these paradoxes. They may only show one or two or three. Some may show most of them, some maybe none of them, but they're very, very prevalent. And this is based on a lot of research done by a lot of folks. And again, I showed you earlier the reference where you could read in more detail about each of these. So combat veterans want to be recognized and appreciated for their service, yet they are sometimes embarrassed or become agitated when they're thanked for, sorry for the typo there, they become agitated when thanked for their service. So I want to be recognized and thanked. Oh, I'm now embarrassed. And why did you thank me? You embarrassed me by thanking me publicly, right? So you get that kind of reaction. Combat veterans are often very happy and angry at the same time. And by the way, these paradoxes are not unique to the military. Many of you who've been in nursing or medics or firefighters or police or other high stress occupations may be resonating with some of these, saying, that's me. I'm angry and happy at the same time. When combat veterans come home from deployment, they're also often thinking about going back. This goes all the way back to World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, other wars in other countries. Veterans, when the war is ongoing, veterans are thinking about getting back. But when they're back, all they think, when they're home, when they're there in combat, they're thinking about going home. When they're home, they want to be back with their buddies. So this is the back there paradox. Combat veterans are often happy that they are alive, but then they feel guilty, that teammates, brothers in arms, sisters in arms may not have been so lucky. So this we call the kanji paradox, the guilt paradox from Japan. The Morpheus paradox, combat veterans will report being physically exhausted. They're keyed up, they won't be able to sleep. I mean, many of you may have felt that as graduate students. You're really tired, but you're keyed up for all the work you have to do. All right, so very similar. Combat veterans are strong and courageous. They've demonstrated this in combat, yet they are afraid to be viewed as weak or damaged. Like you have PTSD, you're suicidal, you're homicidal. So this can stop them from seeking help. This is where I think understanding these paradoxes can help veterans who need help get help and help other veterans get help. Combat veterans want to enjoy life. Sometimes combat veterans have difficulty relaxing, learning to relax. So you have to learn to relax. You have to find something that helps you relax. And if it doesn't help you relax, then look for something else. The intimacy paradox. We know that combat veterans form these intense, intimate bonds with other teammates when they're in combat, and these bonds last a lifetime. Oftentimes, these veterans don't even like each other personally, but if they ever need anything, they're there for each other. But yet they struggle at the same time to reform intimate relationships or form new ones. And it's one of the diagnostic criteria of post-traumatic stress disorder. The safety paradox. Combat veterans no longer fear death. They'll tell you, I'm not afraid to die. But many of them have guns and knives and clubs that they carry with them at all times. Because why? For safety. Not for themselves, but for other people, their loved ones, people they care about. So again, this seems somewhat of a paradox. The silence paradox. Combat veterans will tell you they want to be understood. Service members who served in the military, they want you to understand what their service is like, but they're reluctant to talk about it. So how is someone who's never served going to understand unless they do talk about it? You see, the risk-taking paradox. We know that combat veterans are expert at taking calculated risks. Even service members who've never been to combat are trained in how to take calculated risks. Yet when they leave the military, they often engage in high risk-taking behaviors such as excessive alcohol consumption, substance abuse, speeding, carrying weapons in their vehicle when they're not supposed to, gambling. So these kinds of things we really try to get our arms around. Combat veterans will tell you that they've learned to value the important things in life. My loved ones, living a good life, living a life of integrity. But at the same time, they have trouble letting go of little things. Little things can set them off, like not starting meetings on time, not starting class on time if you're in a class with veterans, not ending the class on time, but things like that. So these are little things, right? I tell you, I would get hung up on those myself. Why aren't we starting on time? I mean, we're always starting late, and then you want me to stay late because we started late, right? Those kinds of things. Those are little minor things, but for veterans and maybe non-veterans too, why can't we start on time? Why can't we be more considerate? Okay. And it also goes with people showing up late for meetings as well. So we have this military mental health dilemma, and it's not really only the military. I talk about it in this context, but I see this dilemma among civilians as well. And basically, it's a specific kind of a triple bind dilemma. Okay, it's a triple bind. Let me go through it. So usually, veterans get care, and even in the civilian side, because someone's forcing them to, either their job, or they're in trouble with the law, or their partner or spouse. Okay, in this example, it's the partner or spouse says, if you don't go to mental health, I'm going to leave you. However, if you lose your job, I'm going to leave you too. All right, so that's the bind. Then there's this other bind from the military culture. It says, if you have a mental health problem, the military say you need to get help. This is the whole anti-stigma campaign, the whole dropping the D disorder from post-traumatic stress disorder. However, if you have a mental health problem, you are not going to be promoted or selected for tough leadership assignments because after all, you just had a mental health problem, or you'll be treated differently by members of your unit. Okay. Now, this is not written down in explicit policy, but this is what soldiers do, and this is what leaders actually say they do too. Okay, but it's not written down anywhere. And then the third binding is, and this is the whole resilience building, that if you have a mental health problem, then you should solve it yourself. If you're a resilient, strong, masculine person, which the culture of the military kind of is all of those things, then you should be able to solve it yourself. And if someone has a mental health problem, though, I'm not really sure how he or she should solve it. And so you see how that's another dilemma. And all of this really conspires for veterans and service members when they go to mental health. They usually don't stay in. And oftentimes the relationship can become unraveled. But we know that those veterans who stay in it, that the spouses will tell us they really got better, he really benefited. And I say he because it's usually men who are going through this, but women experience this as well often for different reasons, such as sexual assault, sexual harassment, etc. But that's another conversation we can have if you like. So hopefully I've convinced you that these paradoxes are important because they're very common, but they also misunderstood, and they can make service members think, I'm losing my mind, I'm going crazy. And sometimes just by saying, no, what your experience is normal, you could see the tension is, oh, you mean I'm not losing my mind? No. But here's what you need to do in these situations, right? Use this skill you have to manage this situation. So that's the part of the battle mind training. It's leveraging skills and strengths that we know soldiers already have to get them through these tough points. Will it get them through every tough point? No. Some may actually have to seek counseling, seek mental health treatment. Okay, so this is, again, doesn't prevent anyone from getting PTSD or depression, but it helps them manage it. It helps them cope with these situations so it doesn't spiral out of control and get worse. And it also just helps explain. Sometimes just understanding what's happening to you is enough. And by the way, that's an intervention. That's normalizing. Normalizing is one of the most powerful interventions that's known to psychotherapy. Normalize and set the expectation for recovery. 80% done. Okay, that last 20% that's really difficult oftentimes. Okay. Now I'm going to move into transition theory, and I hope I've got a friendly audience and everybody loves theory. I know that I speak a lot about this to civilians or to practitioners, and they could care beans about theory. So I've got only one slide in here showing you why theory is important. I hope we all agree. It helps identify the important constructs. Even in A, sometimes I will see analysis and it's just everything in the kitchen sink, and it makes really good predictive models, but it didn't tell me where I would intervene. Okay, good theory helps us do that. Not only does it make the predictions about the relationships, but it also helps us identify points of intervention. And so being an intervention researcher, as well as trying to understand the phenomena, that's what you need. Understanding the phenomena, how constructs related. But really the coup de grace is, can we develop an intervention that actually helps address the problem? That's what we try to do in social work. We want to solve the problem, not just explain it or make predictions. That's good too. We like doing that. Lots of papers on that. But the real impact is what intervention can we do to actually make things better? So this is a schematic of the post transition. So it's the transition from you're in the military and you're getting ready to leave. I'm not going to go into this in any detail because you can read it, but there's a lot of things going on when you're trying to manage the transition. And there are lots of outcomes you can look at. You can look at work outcomes, family, health, general well-being, how well is the veteran integrated in the community. I'm going to show you some data on all of these. But again, this is how theory helps focus us. Like, what part of the transition should we be looking at? The individual factors, what social support do they have? What community support do they have? Every community is different and provides different levels of support. So we got to pay attention to that. Again, just checking out the clock. So there are lots of types of military transitions. There's lots of transitions in life. I think transition theory broadly can explain a lot what goes on in life. You know, like when you leave home to go to college, when you start your first job, when you have your first baby, when all of these things, you have your first divorce, you have your second marriage. All of these are transitions, and how you navigate those could be good or bad. These are just some of the ones in the military. We're going to focus on leaving the military here. That's the data I'm going to show you. But I want you to understand there's lots of work that's been done around transitioning from joining the military, and lots of transitions on returning home from combat or deployment. Okay, I'm not talking about any of that data today. We have lots of data on that. I'm not going to talk about that, but that's really important. And then also just moving all the time from one location to another, these frequent duty locations. So for those of you who may not know this, if you're in the military, you physically move location and jobs every 2 or 3 years. Okay, and that can be very stressful. And some people get out of the military because they're tired of moving all the time. You think about a 20 or 30-year career, you may move 10, 15, 20 times, right? That's very stressful on you, your kids, your family. Ron Astor, who used to be in our school of social work, studied the impact of this culture on children. And obviously, it's like everything. You do too much of it, it's bad. A little bit of it's good, okay? So I wanted to show you one cultural thing, and I'm showing this specifically here because it touches on, you have to be very careful from just reading one paper, reading another paper, and looking at rates and then drawing conclusions. So this is a slide that Sir Professor Simon Wesley at King's College London used to show all the time in the US. So I got, by the way, I'm very, very good friends with Simon. I actually showed this slide in an audience he was at and made fun of him. But he gets this slide where he gets the PCL, which is the post-traumatic stress disorder checklist. And cases means you screen positive and you likely have post-traumatic stress disorder. And he got a couple of papers, their own work that he had done, and then some work from Canada, and looked at the PTSD rates, if you will, those exceeding criteria. And so look at America, they're much worse than anybody else. And oh, by the way, OIF already told you, Operation Iraqi Freedom. The Brits called it Operation Telic. Telic doesn't stand for anything. They just use an automatic generator that gives them a pronounceable word, and it's Telic, and the Canadians just call it combat. So those are in combat, those are not combat. And you look at it and it looks like, well, what's going on here with the US, right? Why are the US rates so high, right? Why are they so high? It looks like what? They're 2-3 times higher. Something must be going on there. You know, what's going on? Well, what Simon would say, Simon Wesley, he would say, well, US service members are exaggerating their symptoms, right? He'd say, well, those Americans, they don't have national health care, so they're exaggerating their symptoms so they can get health care. But what he doesn't know is that the military, and he actually does know this, but the military does have national health care in the military. We also have a Department of Veterans Affairs, which provides health care to veterans. So we have veterans and military have a health care system. But he also says that the UK service members are better trained or have better leaders. Okay. British character is superior to that of the US. And he usually shows this World War I pilot with one of these twirling mustaches, right, standing, you know, smugly next to one of his biplanes, right? Saying superior British character is why they don't suffer from PTSD. I, on the other hand, based on theory, would say maybe it's because U.S. service members deploy longer than UK service members. U.S. service members would deploy 12 months generally, but sometimes 15 months. The British and the Canadians deployed for 6 months. Maybe that's a factor. Remember some data I showed you earlier, right? U.S. service members experience higher levels of combat. I happen to know from being in Iraq myself that the Americans would take all the tough assignments and they would really give, I don't want to say easier combat assignments because I don't think any combat assignment is easier, but they would get the ones where enemy resistance was less expected to be intense. Okay, let me say it that way. Okay. And U.S. service members also are much younger than both the British and Canadian counterparts. These important variables, what I would call demographic variables, are often overlooked. Well, so what had happened is I orchestrated the US and the UK getting together and not just looking at studies, but integrating the raw data sets and controlling for these variables. Like you can't really control for a British superior character, can you? That's kind of hard. What do you mean by that? How would you test whether or not US service members are exaggerating their symptoms, right? You can't even test some of these hypotheses, really. But on mine, these are all demographics, right? Deployment length, combat experiences, and age. What happens when you look at those three things? Now, this again, just well, what do we have here? Now we see that the PTSD rates are no different between the US and the UK. By the way, that 3.6 and 3.9 is not different, even though it's lower for the US. However, alcohol consumption way higher in British forces than in US forces. So why the increase in alcohol consumption? We don't really know that. I think it's a coping behavior, but we can speculate. And then anger or aggression, much higher in the UK. Now, I wasn't an author on this study. As you can see, here are the authors below. You can read this report yourself. I think the increase in aggression is probably related to alcohol use, but they didn't control for that in this analysis, but it is different. So when you actually put the data together, what you see is all of this speculation and all of this back and forth turns out not to really be an issue. Now, unfortunately, we didn't have the Canadian data or some of the Australian data or the data from France or the Netherlands and Germany to include, but this gives you an important thing. And I think the important thing about theory that I want you to take away is good theory transcends culture, eras, and national militaries. So if we have a good theory, it should apply to the Brits, the Canadians, and everybody else. It should apply to veterans from Vietnam, to World War II, to Iraq, Afghanistan, to the current conflict still going on in Syria and other places in the world, right? So this is the beautiful thing about a theory. You don't have to keep coming up with different explanations. You have a single thing that helps us understand. Now we know it's a theory. We know that it's wrong, right? Because it's a theory, but it lets us modify and make it better, okay? So prevents and saves a lot of time and effort. So this is the statement of military transition theory. I kind of already talked about it already. Here are the things that it says that, and by the way, the important thing about transition to appreciate, transitions are neither bad or good. They can be good, they can be bad, right? It produces a change in relationships. Okay, you lose all your friends if you're in the military, but what if you didn't have any friends? It alters your work context. What if I hated my job? Maybe, and I had a terrible boss. Changing jobs could be a good thing, right? So they're not in and of themselves good or bad. It's the context and it's what you bring to it, okay? And the same with all of these other things as well. We do focus on transitions and health and well-being in the transition theory. I already mentioned some of the outcomes we look at, so I'm just going to briefly talk about these. So I apologize, the margin broke off, but the 45 and the 61, the histograms on the left for these, this is pre-OIF veterans, and 68 is post-OIF veterans. So before the Iraq War, Iraq and Afghanistan, and then think after. And you can see veterans are reporting a much more difficult time transition. Okay, almost 2/3, over 2/3 say I'm having a difficult time adjusting back to civilian life. Okay, when I said that earlier. Here's the most important thing: almost 80% don't have a job when they leave the military. Now, if you were moving to India or the UK, wouldn't you want to like have a job before you move there? I mean, these folks are leaving a job they have for a job they don't have. 80% of them have no job when they leave the military. And this can be a problem. 28% of post 9/11 veterans are unemployed in this study. So this was like 7 years after they left the military on average. You don't have the data here, but I can give you the source for this. Over a quarter still didn't have a job. Okay. Most veterans who are unemployed, they say they ain't got any help finding a job. I'm not sure I believe that. I think what it means is that they didn't feel they got help, or the help they got they didn't feel was sufficient. But you can see 3/4 no help. Okay. Veterans have very negative perceptions of civilian employers. And this is about the identity I mentioned. You know, nobody understands me. To know me is to love me. If you really knew me, you would make me CEO of your company, that kind of thing. If you really knew me, you'd promote me to full professor right from the beginning. You wouldn't make me go through a whole review. All right. This is a veteran, very veteran centric. And one could almost say, you know, I know some people talk about the youth of today expecting to start as CEO once they graduate from college, but it's this idea that you don't understand the skills and talents I bring. Many employers still think veterans are dangerous, etc. So these are things that veterans are always trying to overcome. All right. Again, PTSD rates. Remember I mentioned PTSD rates can be very high. Keep in mind, this is probably one of the most vulnerable population, but in this population, you can see about 45%. We've done studies where if you just look at those veterans outside the wire conducting combat operations day in, day out, it's about 40, 45%. So it can be very, very high depending on the specific occupation. Veterans with alcohol problems, again, very high. A quarter report alcohol problems. We did the WHO-DAS. This just shows what is the level of functioning. Again, you're going to have all these slides. Don't worry about getting all the data down. Many veterans don't have a place to live when they leave the military. So how do you think that contributes to homelessness or potential for being homeless? Okay, you get 60% not knowing where they're going to leave when they walk out the gate. I mean, that doesn't sound like a very good transition plan. Here's the percent of homeless. So you see the rate of homeless or potential homelessness is quite high, both pre and post, very, very high. Veteran housing stability. So we look at these housing stability. By the way, in our ongoing Southern Cal study, we're looking at all of these things, and we've really pared it down because we really kind of know now what to look for a little more in detail. Okay, this is looking at those veterans who considered suicide or dying by suicide or made plans. So you can see it's very, very high when you look at one era of veterans to another era. Here is the services. Why aren't you getting help? Many say, I don't know where to get help, but there's help everywhere. All right, there's help everywhere. And so it's like, well, how do we reach these folks who say they don't know where to go? When you get like 40% say, I don't know where to go to get help everywhere. Okay, so what I hope I showed you was that military service can lead to a wide variety of changes. Combat and deployments and service can lead to a wide variety of paradoxes. And many of the efforts, by the way, that are undertaken to help veterans are not really evidence-based, right? We do the best we can in the absence of evidence-based interventions, but I think folks are entitled to evidence-based care. And if it's not evidence-based care, we should just be honest about that and say, this isn't evidence-based, but we think it'll help. It's all we have. I don't think we should call it the gold standard just because everybody's doing it. Doesn't make it the gold standard. It makes it current practice. We shouldn't confuse gold standard with current practice. Okay. Many veterans leave the military ill prepared. So a lot of folks spend a lot of time trying to get them to be more prepared, get them to plan better, get them to have a real plan. I think the military transition theory helped provide a framework for what to look for and when to look for it. And I think the military in the VA do a really good job. And so do civilian communities, but we need to continue to work and provide those effective interventions to improve the mental health, the physical health, the overall well-being of veterans, especially at these transition points. And just a self-serving plug, I'm going to be giving another seminar in early December on the 5 corrosives of the military. So that's just a plug for this. Those who are interested, I'll send it to Haley and she can post it. But that's it. Here's my email. If you want to contact me with any questions or you want to get involved in the work we're doing, I'm working with Eric already, but we'd love to have more people involved in helping us try to get our arms around these really difficult problems that our veterans and service members and families still face. But thank you very much. And I'll stop there. And I think that's 10 minutes for questions or something like that, if I'm looking at my clock correctly. So sorry if I went fast, but these slides will be available for everyone.
Well, thank you, Carl. It's wonderful, and I appreciate that you gave some time for questions. I will. So let's see. Looks like I'm going to go to the Q&A button. So somebody said, where will the recording be posted? I think that we'll handle that in terms of Haley will post that up. Is the unemployment rate of veterans higher or lower than that of the average in society? Was a clarification question.
That's a great question. And it depends on when you look, right? So early on, veteran unemployment was much higher than civilians. The latest data I have seen is it's come down, and I think in some ways looks a little better. It looks a little better. So employment is one of the things, and it's also regional as well. So depending on what region of the country you look, you may or may not see differences. The data that I showed was specific for Los Angeles because, California does a really good job of tracking employment status by race, gender, ethnicity, and veteran. So all of that is well known, and we can look at that and see how our data compares to the state of California's data, et cetera. But I think right now veteran employment looks good, and just in terms of, do you have a job? But of course, what employment data never does is, do you have a meaningful job? Do you have a job you think is taking full advantage of your skills, right? Do you have a job that pays you enough to live, right? These kinds of questions, usually you don't find in a lot of the data the government collects, especially the meaningful job. Like, do you feel you have a meaningful job? But I think if you don't have a meaningful job, you can get a hobby and supplement your meaningful job with something else. But given how much time we spend at work, it'd be nice if we enjoyed it, we liked our boss, we liked our colleagues. So a lot of work needs to be done there still.
Oh, that's great. There's two more comments that are a little bit more toward the AI end of things. So one is from John Blazonich, who's another faculty member in the School of Social Work, and he's commenting that the Veterans Administration has been implementing predictive analytics with electronic health and administrative data to try to identify veterans at risk for suicide. And he says that these algorithms are largely atheoretical, as you described them, or as he's putting in quotes, dump in all the data and let it tell us what's going on. He wants to know what your thoughts are around efforts like this and how researchers and communities could be engaged in maybe bringing some more nuance to these problems. I think you had touched on this some at one point in your work, where the value of theory was to get us beyond this sort of dump everything into the model and hope for the best sort of thought. So you want to comment a little bit more on that? It'd be great.
It's a great question. And, so ultimately you want to predict, right? Because you want to know what are the risk factors, if you will, but you also want to know where to intervene, right? So if you know, for example, let me just take suicide because you mentioned that as an example. We know, for example, and the Army has the best data on this. So this is not because I'm in the Army that I'm saying this. The Army just has better data for some of these constructs. So we know, for example, that 25% of all suicides, so all deaths by suicides in the Army, 25% of them occur within the first 2 years of joining the Army. Think about that. A quarter during that transition of joining the military. So if you were going to try to intervene to get your arms around suicide, where would you intervene? Would you do a training once a year for the next 20 years of someone's career? Or would you focus resources during that first 2 years on those young, vulnerable soldiers who just joined? We also know, and this I didn't present this data, but we also know that another 25% of suicides in the Army occur within 6 months of soldiers returning home from combat. Now, I've just identified 2 time points where half of all suicides occur. Half. You would think, let's put some effort, additional effort at those 2 time points. But that's not what the organization does, because the organization does mandatory suicide prevention training once a year for everybody the same way. assumes everybody's at equal risk, when we know they're not. And there's been some really good analytics of this data set showing that you could identify like 90% of all soldiers who die by suicide and just not let them join. But that would, but in addition to that 90%, you would also exclude about another 10,000 soldiers who weren't going to die by suicide, but you'd have to exclude them because the predictive analytics are not really that good yet. So I think what we need to do is combine both. You combine both, like what's the best predictions? And then are those predictors, does that tell us anything about how to develop an intervention? I think it's important to know where, at what time point to intervene. And that's really what the transition theory is all about. Where on these transition time points that happen where are soldiers, where are service members, where are veterans the most vulnerable? We also know, for example, from VA data, that another vulnerable time point is when veterans first leave the military, when they're transitioning back into their civilian life. So these transition points are something going on. And by the way, it's not just for suicide. We know the same thing is true for sexual assaults and other kind of bad outcomes. They usually happen around these transition points. So, but knowing who during those transition points, that's critical, right? So there are no transition points. What is our best predictor? So I think the combining these two techniques is the most optimal. That's kind of my own bias, is we need both. We need the predictive analytics, whether they're based on theory or not, but then we need to take them and then apply those outcomes in a theoretical framework where we can intervene with the best type of intervention at the right time.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. There's another question that said, could you elaborate more on why such a high percentage of veterans don't have a home when they're transitioning back to civilian life?
Well, in 2 words, poor planning. All right. So let me just say it that way, poor planning. And I will say a lot of it is, so there are lots of ways you leave the military. You can leave what I call planned, which means my enlistment's up. I know I'm getting out. I'm not going to re-enlist, right? And I'm going to go back to school, or I've got a year to plan for a job, etc. But most of them are unplanned, so you're mad at your supervisor, so you're not re-enlisting, so you're getting out in 3 months. Well, how much money have you saved up, right? If you're going to move from one city to another city or one country to another country, you're going to need some money in your pocket to get a place to stay, because if you don't have a job, you don't have a place to stay, where are you going to live? I will tell you anecdotally, and I say anecdotally loosely, I've conducted hundreds of interviews with veterans across the country. I won't say thousands, but close to 1,000. I estimate about 80% of all the males in the room had no place to live when they left the military. Really mirrors perfectly with our quantitative data. So I asked them, I said, well, where did you live? You left the military with no place to live. Where did you live? I will say about 60%, half of them, lived with their girlfriends. Homeless rates would be double, maybe triple what they are today if it wasn't for girlfriends, because that's where they end up staying. And I said, well, how long did you do that? The girlfriend got tired of supporting them, so kicked them out, right? Does this sound? Some were very tolerant, put up with their nonsense for a year or two, and then they finally got their act together. Okay, so they're different pathways, but most of them end up living with their girlfriends because they don't have a place to stay, and they can't go home. Going home, living with my parents was not an option. You could see the kind of family. A lot of them moved back home. A lot of these veterans moved back home with their mother and father. And I will tell you, in talking to parents, when this happens, mothers are thrilled that the soldier, the airman's coming back home. Dad, not so much. Okay, so this thing could lead to conflict. Some end up with brothers and sisters. And usually when you end up homeless, you've burnt a lot of bridges. The pathway is you lived with a girlfriend, she kicked you out, moved in with your sister, they kicked you out. Then so it's like this series of step in a bad trajectory. But a lot of it's just poor planning. A lot of service members just do not fully understand, if you're going to move to LA, you need to have some money in your pocket to get a place to live, pay utilities, pay living expenses, and they all underestimate how much that costs. And they also underestimate how long it's going to take them to find a good job. They think they're going to just find a job that pays them $200,000 a year and life will be good. And the reality is obviously not that. And so a lot of it is just they're not being realistic. They're not really doing good planning in that transition. So that's my kind of speech I give. You got to plan and you got to have money. You got to have money to live in America.
Yeah. Well, Carl, thank you so much. It is 3 o'clock and I want to be mindful of your time and everyone else's. And thank you for such a thought-provoking presentation with such rich content area. Hopefully some folks who are interested in AI approaches to analytics and the like will take you up on your invitation to join and take a look at your data and help use technology around some of the predictive aspects of things, as well as the theory-driven aspects of the work to design interventions. And so I wish we were in a big room so that we could applaud you, but I'll serve as the applause.
That's all right. Thank you all very much.
So yes, thanks a lot, Carl.
Here's again, please contact me. I really mean that. Please contact me. We'd love to have you involved.
Email address is there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you.